Welcome to the War Room, gentlemen. Today we're going to discuss the importance of her body count. Now, a lot of times whenever you're engaging with a girl for the early beginnings of the relationship, many times those things are held sacred, the body count, the past, the history. And as I've discussed in previous videos, there's an obvious reason for that, because most of the time, if men knew the truth, even half a truth of what a woman had been through or what she's done, most of the time you'd run and you would never turn back. And even though a lot of these women like to pretend to be proud or, not really ashamed of the things that they've done to gain attention, if that was actually the truth, they wouldn't lie about it. Now, the other day I was talking to one of my guys that I pretty much raised from a pup, and he's turned into somewhat of a social justice warrior, if you will. And I guess you could say that he was raised by a single mother, even though his father was very involved in his life. His mother was very controlling and pretty much dominated the way that the young man thought. Even though along the way he made some choices, he did a little bit of living. Pretty much today he's in step with the feminist imperative, and his belief system is that of a modern millennial young man. And a while back we were having a conversation about this, and we were talking about basically just loose women. And in the conversation, he made a statement that was very telling of the mindset, the conditioned mindset of modern dudes, and why they suffer from a lot of the things that they suffer from in the relationships with these women. And what he said was that he didn't really have time to engage with a girl that didn't, or a woman who didn't have a lot of sexual experience, because he didn't have the time to try to train her. And while that sounds macho and cool and everything, but I'm a grown ass man, and I know that part of the thrill is getting to train your beast to do what you want it to do. And so it's just kind of struck me as odd that this guy, the way that he thinks about it is, sure, I hope she sucked 100 dicks, because that way she'll suck mine better. And I guess if that's the mindset you have, if you can frame that up in a manner that you can look at those numbers and not get sick to your stomach, then by all means, be the 101st dick in her mouth, and make sure you kiss those other 100. That's the way I see it. I mean, if I know that a woman's got a terrible roster, the only thing that I can give her is some advice and a prayer, because to me that's absolutely disgusting. I don't need a woman to show me the tricks that she was taught by another man. But that really got me to thinking about all of the different things, not just the part of thinking about the girl that you're, I don't know, opening yourself up to, doing whatever nasty shit a whole lot of previous dudes have done. If that's not enough to really make you pump your brakes and think about what you're doing, who you're doing it with, there are a couple of other things that, once you start to consider them, the idea of having a roster, or, pumping and dumping, or just really dealing with any of these women that are out here, that are really, for all intents and purposes, the ones that are the most available, when you start to really think about what you're actually getting, and no pun intended there, what you're actually getting in return for whatever investment you make, that's, you might really want to rethink that investment, even if it's just a Big Mac and, pulling into an alley somewhere. Now, one of the things that I've come to learn over my course of, my lifetime, and dealing with women and dating and just doing all the madness that comes with it, is that the women who have the most experience in bed with men tend to have the most mental disturbances out of all of them. And it's really, I mean, it's kind of understandable when you think about it, because we all understand that most women don't have any real personality of their own. And the way that with the narcissistic culture that we have today, they don't really have to. All they have to do is, put on some fake eyelashes, show their booty a little bit, and get all the thirsty dudes on whatever social media platform they have, and that's enough to boost them up enough to keep them going. And so when you look at how if you don't have a personality of your own, how many times you have to change who you are, what you like, where you go, what you like to do, and then in return you have to sell your soul, and that cognitive dissonance that comes with being able to lay down with multiple different men, sometimes in the same day, and drive home with stuff leaking down their legs and not find the disgust in that. You have to understand the mental disturbance that goes with that. And it's really kind of like a junkie, even though some people that are addicted to heroin, when they're not high, they know that they don't need to. The best thing for them to do is not to go find some more heroin, but they can't help it. And that's what, women who are thoughty, women who are really slutty, they can't help to be that way because of whatever their trauma or whatever it is that they're trying to level out in their lives. That has to be constant. And generally one person they cannot be enough, because it's like a black hole. It's a void inside of them, and they're addicted to the novelty. Because once people find out that this person is just a hollow shell of a human being, they have to find somebody else and adapt to somebody new. So the first thing that you get with a woman who has a high body count is some sort of mental disorder. If you're on the lucky side, she's just a delusional narcissist who conflates men's willingness to bang her out and leave her on the curb with genuine interest from men. And that's that's cognitive dissonance. They take these things and form a whole belief system out of them, which is often very, very false. And so when you run into these people, because oftentimes the men don't understand the kind of animal they're dealing with, they don't understand that they're dealing with the mirror. And these women who have high body counts have a very, very innate nature and innate ability to look at their victims and mirror them and become exactly what the man wants. And that's just like a parasite. They get what they want from you, and in return, it's easy sex. The next thing is that comes with having multiple bodies on the roster is the skeletons. Whenever you're dealing with a woman who has a lot of dudes in her life, you have to think about yourself. Now, most guys aren't really, well, I don't know that most dudes are, but I would like to believe that most guys aren't really hella thirsty. And when you get done with a woman, if you're just pumping and dumping her, then, if she answers those texts, then you'll continue to do it. But if you find yourself in a relationship with one of these people, very seldom will men hang around. Only the real simp suckers, or the ones who are delusional and never really figure out the game. And those are the guys, or you'll get the guys who really simply don't care. They'll play the game, maybe they'll both cheat on one another, they'll get caught, they'll laugh it off, and they'll still be bone buddies. But what you have to always worry about with a woman who has a big giant roster is the reality that very very often those dudes don't go anywhere. If there's a relationship and the chick just straight up just dogs the dude out and he's done with her, then chances are he won't have anything to do with her. But what these people often do is they don't really give anyone closure. They don't give closure. They'll just simply move to the next dude and leave the guy sitting there in ashes trying to figure out what went on. Maybe sprinkle him a little bit of bullshit along the way, and when she's ready to come back and pick him up, then there'll be a little bit of love in here and there. Give you a little peace, leave, pay get you to pay her bill or whatever it is that she needs from you at the time, and then you'll be back in the closet with the rest of the skeletons. And that's the way that these things tend to work. Women with a high body count have a high body count for a reason. They're insatiable on so many different levels. The physicality part of it, some of them enjoy it, but most of them, that's all they have to offer. And so what they do is, for whatever resources, be it time, attention, whatever, money, the guy whatever guys that are in their life are always giving them one of, if not all of those things, and in return she fucks him. And that's the way it goes. If you're dealing with a situation where you're dealing with a woman and you can see anything that makes your insides, your manhood stir up, you need to follow that, because she is going to lie. Those things are resources to her. And you need to, my next video will be going further into depth on narcissism and vampires, because a lot of these women, again, who have high body counts are like vampires. They use people for substance, like vampires use people for food. And so what you have to do is you have to really pay attention to the background. Just like when you're shooting, you have to pay attention to the foreground and what's in the background. A lot of these women will not hide their digital footprint. They need to have these men seeing them, applauding them, praising them, propping them up at all times. And so they're willing to roll the dice, because most guys are gullible and too proud, scared, or stupid to ask questions of the men that they see lurking in the background. Now, again, this is going to springboard into the next one, the cheating. Whenever you're dealing with a woman who has a John Wick body count, you're very seldom going to find an instance where, when you have a conflict with this person, that they're going to work it out with you. These people cheat all the time. Again, that's why they have a high body count. Most of the time, you can go through these people's history and you'll find several lily pad relationships where, if you look at what they had everything that they said that they want, but they're insatiable. It's not enough. There's never enough attention. There's never enough novelty. And in any relationship, it takes work. Anytime you get into a relationship, you can pretty much knock off the first 90 to 120 days as bullshit. You're bullshitting her, she's bullshitting you. If you can cut through all of that bullshit and get to the real person, you'd probably make way better decisions about what you do in your life. But these women that have a lot of guys on their roster, you have to know those dudes didn't go anywhere if they figured out that all they have to do is give her a little bit to give some fucking sex. That's it. And that's a pretty good trade if you just don't want to rub one out, and you do the math and you figure, you know what, I'll feed her, I'll run her through the drive-through, and then just nail her in the parking lot of her apartment and just let her go from there. For a lot of times, that's worth it. And with these women, it's always on the table. If you're a higher quality dude, even than the guy that she's calling her boyfriend, she'll cancel on him and run through McDonald's with you and catch the parking lot, and then she'll call him afterwards and talk about how tired she is, or she has a headache or whatever, and then get that clown to rub her back after you broke it off. That's the way it goes. That is definitely the way that it goes. Now, we'll springboard into the next one, STDs. The statistical information about the number of women on a percentile basis that are carrying around some form of STD is staggering. Now, when you consider that that this percentage is well over 50%, and then consider how many different men these women lay down with no protection, you can see where you very well might overlap with some of these dudes. If you're meeting a woman who's giving it up to you relatively easy, you can delude yourself into believing that you're some top level dude, and maybe you are. But if she's got you, chances are she's got several other of you. And that's the way it goes. We know this. So the STDs that's huge. Do you want to have to worry about warts on your piece, or taking pills, or having to go get your blood checked to make sure your levels are dialed in because you laid down with some nasty thought? Again, high body count is very, very, very telling of what you're going to deal with in a person. If this woman's been with a bunch of men, you know she's got something. If she doesn't have it now, you know she's had it. It's almost inevitable. Now, this leads me perfectly into the most disgusting and the most probably the most important part of it. Aside from all of the mental disorders, the cheating, the skeletons in the closet, all of that stuff, research has recently found that women hold the DNA of men inside their bodies. Now, when I first heard about that, I thought it was kind of weird, and then I started looking into it, and then I started to think about it a little bit. If you think about what DNA is, how much of it is that we don't actually understand, it's basically the building blocks of life. And so each one of us has a unique code. That's why they can detect you if something happens. They get your DNA, they can find out within a really close percentile if it was you or not. Now, if it's that specific, then that means that each one of us, just like each one of us is a different individual, each one of us has different DNA, which makes us different. And probably, I would assume, in all sense of the word. So when you consider a woman who's been skeeted in by 50, 100, 500 dudes, and then you look at what you're dealing with, if DNA is something that actually changes a person's biology, if what we see when a woman gets a new boyfriend and they start sleeping together, if that glow that we see is and the change in her personality, what if that was from the man? That's one of the things that I noticed when I got red pilled by this nasty dumpster whore was whenever she would go on an excursion with one of her girlfriends, she would come back different. And I couldn't really put my finger on it, but something was different. She looked a little bit different. She acted a little bit different. Everything was a little bit different. And, it didn't take long for me to catch on to it when the music taste started to change after so long of being stagnant. That's when I knew there's outside influences. But the real telling part was her personality. When I met her, she was a whore, and I didn't know it, but there was a light. And the light was because there were a bunch of different guys that were feeding her their DNA, if you will, as disgusting as it is. Now, after her glow wore off is when she tried to stop being a whore. She tried to lock down, or she started really, really trying to hide it and lie. Whatever it was, there was a change in the way that she operated. Well, her real self started to come out, and she was fucking miserable, sad. She was just a disgusting person. And so when I started to pull back from her, she, every now and then I would pop back in and, holler at her, and she was the same person. Well, when she started to get a couple of feathers on her wings, she started to change, and things started to get different. And in short order, I figured things out and ended up bailing and watching from the mountaintop, and exactly what I felt was what it was. And so what I've seen and what I've noticed, and when I went back and started thinking about her and all the chicks that I've dealt with in the past that were just really broken spirits that were trying to plug themselves, plug a hole that was just an endless pit with attention from other people. The thing that really that made me just crystal clear on it was every time these people would find somebody and start doing what they do, when they started testing that branch, they started to change. They get a little bit more cocky, a little bit more confident. And basically, I believe it was because these dudes are shooting into them. They're blasting into these broads, and that's giving them the confidence, not just because of the support mechanism, but because the actual transfer of DNA, an actual transfer of our most important fluid that we can, that's how we make children, that's how we make people. We pass it through that very same DNA fluid. That very same fluid is what gives life. And so when you look at this study of microchimerism, it makes you really think, when you're dealing with a woman that's got a really high body count, not only are you having to deal with the personality traits of all of these different dudes, all of her favorite parts of all of these different men, inside of her very well could be lurking of the most fundamental genetic component inside of her brain or hiding somewhere inside of her body. Every one of those dudes who blasted in her could be standing in line inside of her watching you do the same. Add to the collection plate. Her body count matters, gentlemen. If she gets defensive when you ask, you already know the answer. If she tells you something that makes your sensitivities and common sense as a man, if a flag goes off, it's time to go. Stay sharp. Stay sharp and don't let anybody tell you that it's none of your business. It's always your business. Out.